There's a lot of rumors floating around the internet and in the news media.
This is big. We are sitting down with one of the criminal defense attorneys of Sean Diddy Combs as the convicted rap mogul awaits sentencing in federal court and a decision on whether he'll actually be released from jail before sentencing. Oh, and by the way, there's also talk that he may get a pardon from the president. Yeah, all this going on. I get the chance to actually discuss what has been happening behind the scenes with...
The courtroom was suffocatingly tense, the air thick, heavy with anticipation. Reporters stood pressed against the back wall, their cameras poised, their microphones trembling with the weight of the moment. And then, just when everyone thought it was over, just when Diddy's fate seemed sealed, his lead attorney dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the entire room. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, his voice sharp, calm, deliberate, "we are filing an immediate motion for bail, and based on the new developments, my client could be released any moment." The judge's expression didn't change, but everyone could see the flicker of surprise in his eyes. Diddy, sitting stiffly at the defense table, looked up for the first time in hours, for the first time since his devastating sentence. There was a flicker of something behind his eyes, hope. Just moments earlier, he had been a broken man. The mogul who once strutted through red carpets with untouchable swagger now sat in a wrinkled suit, his face drawn and tired. The weight of the guilty verdict still hung around him like a chain, but that single sentence from his lawyer changed everything. Suddenly, the energy in the room shifted. The prosecutors looked furious, whispering to one another. The reporters began frantically texting their editors. Diddy's lawyer says he could be out on bail. Within minutes, the headlines were being drafted, the tweets were flying, and social media was exploding.
Justin Dior Combs was born in 1993, right around the time that Combs was getting his feet wet in the music business at Uptown Records in New York. His mother is Misa Hilton, by the way, the stylist, the fashion designer who's actually been seen at Combs' current criminal trial, by the way. Now, after playing as both a quarterback and cornerback in high school in New York, Justin started college at UCLA in 2012 and joined their football program. Now, according to UCLA's roster, Justin didn't see any playing time his first year, but then took the field in 2013 and the 2014 season. And in June of 2015, Combs apparently took issue with the way that one of his coaches was treating his son. So he ends up taking it up with the coach in person in the sports off-season. Now, we got our hands on a report from the University of California Police which lays out what reportedly happened here. Quote, "Suspect went to the UCLA weight training facility with his son, a member of the football team, to confront the strength and conditions coach regarding his dismissal of the son from practice that day. The coach was on the phone and motioned for him to wait. After a short time, the suspect and his son entered the office and words were exchanged. The suspect approached the coach and physically assaulted him, causing some minor scratches and tearing his shirt. Several members of the training staff came to the coach's aid and removed the suspect from the coach's office. The suspect then briefly strangled an intern, causing minor scratches to his neck. Members of the staff were able to move the suspect toward the exit. The suspect briefly put another member of the coach's staff in a headlock-type hold. The suspect then obtained a small kettlebell weight and swung it in the direction of the staff members. The weight did not strike anyone. The suspect then left. The suspect's son claims the suspect's actions were in self-defense. Then there's something that's redacted. Due to the minor nature of the injuries and fleeing use of the weight not resulting in any contact with the victim, the case is referred to the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office for misdemeanor filing consideration. Now, according to UCLA, Combs was arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. And the charges were actually later upgraded to 3 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, 1 count of making terroristic threats, and 1 count of battery. He was booked into the Los Angeles County Inmate Reception Center. But here's how it all shook out. So ESPN reported at the time that there was some sort of discrepancy on how much Combs' bail was, so he ends up getting released, and the police department sends over their recommendation to the district attorney's office, and they declined to prosecute. That's according to Variety. But that was not the only alleged episode of violence. Many of Combs' legal problems date back to the 90s when he shot to stardom as the founder of Bad Boy Records, which later became Bad Boy Entertainment. And he had some pretty serious beef with this fellow record executive over at Interscope Records named Steve Stout. So Stout claimed that Combs and 2 other men beat him up in 1999. According to the LA Times, Combs had a cameo appearance in a music video for the song Hate Me Now by Nas. And his scene was controversial. He was being nailed to a cross, something that he helped conceive and that reportedly cost Interscope an extra $14,000 to make happen. Well, apparently, after talking to his mother and pastor, Combs had a change of heart and decided he didn't want that scene in the video. But when it premiered on TRL on MTV, who remembers that show? This happened a few days later.
Critics alike were losing their minds. He's getting out? One fan shouted, "How is that even possible?" Another voice yelled back, "Money talks, man, it always does." But inside, the lawyer was calm, composed, almost smug. He held up a thick document, new evidence, freshly filed. "We have identified procedural errors," he declared, "and under new grounds for appeal. The sentencing conditions are no longer enforceable as previously ruled." The words hung in the air like electricity. The judge leaned back. "You're asking for bail," he said, voice measured. "After this court issued a full custodial sentence." "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer replied, unfazed, "and I'm confident the circumstances warrant reconsideration." Diddy leaned toward him, whispering something the microphones couldn't pick up, but the expression on his face said it all. After weeks of public humiliation, after being dragged through headlines, lawsuits, and scathing testimonies, the idea of freedom, even temporary, was intoxicating.
Yeah, like I said earlier, that was the place to be.
Yeah, we were talking about it before. Do you have any idea why those doors were closed? The bottom of the stairs?
Someone closed them, and I believe certain people said it was Jessica Rosenblum, it was who was at the front door, Sean potentially, but I think they were at risk of thinking people were going to rush the door anyway because they said that it's over, no one else is getting in, and people weren't having that, especially people who had tickets. So someone closed the door, and they closed the door without understanding or, I guess, helping the people. There were about, 50 or less people in the staircase waiting to get in.
Yeah.
Celebrities, there were hip hop celebrities there that were with 3 people who passed away. So they should have been in or gone through the back. LL Cool J should have went through the back. There was no, just imagine a celebrity today walking through the crowd of an event, and then they go in. Now the crowd is really excited, even more excited.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was. People will walk right in from the front, past the crowd, and then they won't let anyone in. And there was lack of security.
Disaster.
Yeah.
What role do you think Sean Combs plays in this?
I think he was like I would say the primary promoter. And, he knows how to get a crowd even then. He knows how to get people to come to a party. And I think he was a party promoter. That was his thing at that time, besides the internship label stuff he was doing. There were 10 defendants, so I can't always, and this is my mother who said this, God bless her, there were 10 defendants. So you can't just point the finger directly at him, but he was the one who paid the money to Cassandra Kieran, I think that's her name, in student government, $1,200 to rent the gym. Then he just called everybody, or called his friend to call his friend, celebrities, and put their names. We're gonna do a basketball game, and it sounded fun. I believe if no one passed away, it would have been a great event.
Right.
For $12, in advance, $20 at the door, but.
What did you make of his response afterwards?
He really didn't say much.
Yeah.
I've met him a few times, but I didn't like, he said something in a rap song that my mother.
Public humiliation. After being dragged through headlines, lawsuits, and scathing testimonies, the idea of freedom, even temporary, was intoxicating. Cameras outside captured the chaos as the news broke. Anchors on live TV were visibly stunned. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're hearing breaking news from inside the courthouse. Diddy's lawyer has just stated that his client could be granted bail any moment pending appeal." For the first time in days, Diddy's name wasn't trending next to words like convicted or sentenced. It was trending with bail, release, and unexpected twist. His legal team's strategy was clear: move fast, hit hard, and create doubt. They argued that Diddy wasn't a flight risk, that he had strong community ties, and that his wealth shouldn't automatically disqualify him from pre-appeal release. They painted a picture of a man unfairly treated, hounded by the media, and victimized by bias in the system. Meanwhile, prosecutors were livid. They countered immediately, calling the motion a desperate attempt to escape justice. One prosecutor—
That felt like a straightforward path to conviction. Wasn't surprised, not guilty with Jane, given some of the gray areas of her testimony, but also the jury didn't even ask for one readback of her testimony or anything to do with her testimony, so it made me think they might have already been decided there. I was surprised about Cassie Ventura sex trafficking just because, like you said, the readback of that testimony, and then shortly thereafter, they came back yesterday and said, we have a verdict on that charge. So I thought, they're convinced. And when it came to racketeering, I thought they were still going to be hung because they said they were at an impasse yesterday. It seemed like based on their note, there was no way that would change. The judge told them to continue deliberating. They come back today, and like in an hour, they come back not guilty on racketeering. I'm not really sure what that split ultimately will be. Maybe the jurors will speak out and we'll hear. Got to ask you about Diddy's reaction. Okay, so we have courtroom sketches of what it looked like. You were in there. What was his reaction to the verdict?
Oh, he was very pleased with the verdict. Obviously, I think for the defense and the defendant, that being Sean Combs, I think obviously they would have wanted an acquittal on all the charges. But I think given that they weren't a conviction on the more serious charges of RICO conspiracy and sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie in one charge and Jane in another charge, I think overall Combs was very, very pleased with the jury, to the point where I saw him kind of mouth a little thank you to the jurors as they were still sitting kind of in the jury box, as they were kind of leaving for the end of their day. Obviously, we still have some more matters to address for our end. But in terms of just his reaction, even his family's reaction, Jesse, I think they were so happy knowing that there's such a strong possibility that their father will come home. Obviously, if he would have been convicted on the more serious charges, that might have been a different discussion. But given that he was only convicted on count 3 and 5, that being the Mann Act, it seems like given that it comes with a lesser penalty and sentencing, I think the family is like, yes, our father is coming home, our loved one is coming home, and we hope to see him very, very soon.
And talk about a reaction. Outside that courthouse, my gosh, what has been going on out there? There's what, verbal disputes, people spraying things. What is, just give us a brief summary of what you've witnessed outside that courthouse after the verdict.
I've witnessed a lot, Jesse. A lot was going on. There was kind of, I will even say, pandemonium after the verdict was read. And outside, a lot of Diddy supporters, a lot of people who are kind of with the Free Diddy, I wouldn't say movement, but I guess, they believed in his innocence. They were very pleased, even thinking that it was a possibility he'd just walk outside of that courthouse at some point. But it was a lot of commotion. I did see some people getting to some heated debates, especially in relation to Cassie. I saw some people getting very upset because they believed that the government was trying to take a good man down who did a lot for the culture. Those types of conversations were being had from a lot of people in the public. I even saw some kind of weirder things, and that being people squirting baby oil on themselves. And one of the reporters even got some on her shirt by one of the people who were kind of over in that area. And so a lot was going on, to the point that I think the courthouse police were just kind of like, okay, we need everybody to calm down. They have barricades going all the way down the street. I think in the event that Sean Combs would have walked out of that courthouse, it would have just been straight chaos, I think, outside. But for the most part, especially...
This defendant has the resources to flee the country, to manipulate witnesses, and to obstruct ongoing investigations. Bail would be a mockery of this court. But the defense didn't back down. They had already prepared statements, testimonies, and even character witnesses ready to speak in Diddy's favor. Industry allies, silent for weeks, suddenly began making noise again. One producer tweeted, "They can't keep a good man down. #Free Diddy." The courtroom became a battlefield. Every sentence, every motion, every pause carried monumental weight. And through it all, Diddy sat motionless, staring straight ahead, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. To the cameras, he looked stoic, but inside, his mind was spinning. Freedom, the possibility...
Was the defense's argument, hey, all the people who testified against Sean Combs were not being truthful, or we're taking their accounts, we're listening to their accounts, and what they're saying just didn't amount to a federal crime? Is it a mixture of both? Just trying to understand what the argument was.
I mean, I think it was a mixture. It depended on the witness, and a lot of the witnesses were telling the truth, but the truth didn't hurt Sean. It helped him. There were some people who were shading the truth. The great thing about it was there was a ton of evidence in written communications that people had created at the time, all these text messages. There were videos, and that really helped us expose the truth because these were things that had been recorded this is what people were, the girlfriends, others were saying to Sean at the time of the events in question. And so, there was really no way for the witnesses or the government to hide what was in the written documents.
Now, I will tell you, if you had been following what we've been doing here on Sidebar Law and Crime, we call balls and strikes. So there were, during the course of the trial, we would say this was the strength of the prosecution, this was the strength of the defense. There was such effective cross-examination of these key witnesses that we all kind of wondered, was the defense going to call any witnesses? And you really did. And what was that decision? Because I understand there were witnesses who were planning to be called. There was an idea to put forward a defense case. There was a choice not to do that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that strategy was about?
Sure. I mean, you always have to be ready to put on a case. At the end of the day, what it comes down to at the end of the government's case is how well do you feel it went in for us? And it's always risky to put on a defense case. People don't realize that, but there's always two sides to everything. And if you put on a witness, and even if it's, 70% good, if the prosecution scores some points, it can really undermine you. And so if you feel like the government's case has gone in really well for you, it can be actually riskier to call any witnesses. People don't necessarily realize that. But at the end of the day, we just made a decision that we thought the case had come in well, and we didn't want to, sort of change the dynamic in a way that could be risky for us.
Was Christina Coram ever potentially going to be called by the defense? We were all shocked why the government never chose to call her, since, her name came up almost every single day through almost every witness. Was there a plan by the defense to call her?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into specific plans or non-plans, but it was more of an overall decision just not to put anyone on and just to use a few pieces of evidence that hadn't come in.
What do you think about the prosecution's choice not to call her? Because I will tell you, we did lunchtime shows, live shows with our audience. I would say 80% of the questions that we got during 7 weeks of testimony was, why is she not being called and will she be called? Were you surprised the prosecution chose not to call who was supposed to be the main alleged co-conspirator?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that she would have been a double-edged sword for them, and they probably didn't want to take the risk. As you saw during the trial, even a number of the witnesses that they had always planned to call that they did put in kind of blew up in their faces or had positive things to say about Sean that maybe they weren't anticipating. And so it would have been pretty risky for them to put Christina Coram on the stand, I think.
Spinning the story, justice is coming, one spokesperson said outside the courthouse. We've always believed in due process. Mr. Combs is confident the truth will prevail. But not everyone was buying it. Critics and former associates saw it as yet another manipulation, another attempt to exploit his influence. He's trying to buy his way out, one anonymous industry insider told reporters. Every time he's cornered, he finds a loophole. This time shouldn't be any different. Still, the machine was in motion. Inside his penthouse legal office, Diddy's attorneys were already preparing contingency plans. They had investigators, consultants, and PR specialists working around the clock. They drafted arguments claiming the evidence was mishandled, the testimonies coerced, and the judge's sentence disproportionate to precedent. Even legal analysts on national news couldn't agree on what would happen next. Some said the motion for bail would be rejected immediately. After all, Diddy was a convicted felon with pending investigations.
Obviously a political angle to it. There are comments that she has made. But I have to ask, you going head to head against her for so many weeks, months and before that, the firing of her, what did you make of that?
I mean, I think it was unfortunate. She's a very well-respected prosecutor. We had good sort of professional relationships with her during the course of the trial. And, I don't really think it had anything to do with the trial, but I can't really say anything beyond that. It just,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. Let's talk about something we can get into quite a bit. Let's talk bail. Okay, so we did a previous sidebar breaking down the defense's renewed motion for release, several arguments for why Sean Combs, should be released on bail pending sentencing, acquitted of the most serious charges. There's no comparable case of someone who is convicted of the Mann Act alone and not engaging in sex trafficking or a prostitution for financial gain, and they would be locked up like this. Talked about the issues plaguing the MDC, how it is dangerous, how he's not a risk of flight, not a danger to the community. But do you think Judge Arun Subramanian is going to be persuaded by your letter, by your motion? Because obviously he specifically highlighted after the verdict your client's violence, how the defense asserted at trial that Combs was violent. Do you think he's going to have a change of opinion now based upon the legal papers?
Well, I think we certainly hope so. And, as we pointed out in the papers, the unfortunate violence that occurred was mostly a really long time ago, other than the one incident in June that Jane testified to, which was kind of unusual. I mean, they had been together for 3 years. There had been no violence, and she essentially started the fight. I'm not excusing anything, but it was kind of a one-off. And I think the government really hadn't put in any evidence of any recent violence. The Intercontinental video, remember, that was almost 10 years ago. He broke up with Cassie in 2018. And in our reply papers yesterday, we submitted a letter from Gina Hyun, who was one of the alleged victims, a different ex-girlfriend. And I think it was a pretty powerful letter about how Sean has changed, how she's not concerned about violence. She thinks he should be released on bail. So we're hoping that that will persuade the judge, given everything else, particularly, as you noted, like the really, really unusual nature of this particular Mann Act conviction and the fact that he's already been in prison, or jail rather, for like 11 months.
Others, however, believed his lawyers had found a technical gap in the ruling that could give him temporary release. If anyone can afford the kind of defense that pulls this off, one commentator said, it's Diddy. As the court recessed, reporters tried to catch a glimpse of the mogul being escorted out. For the first time, he didn't look defeated, he didn't look broken. He looked like a man who smelled blood in the water, a man who just realized the fight wasn't over. And that's when the real chaos began. Outside, crowds gathered, chanting, arguing, recording. The hashtag Free Diddy began trending worldwide. Fans cheered, critics jeered. The debate reignited. Was he a victim of a broken system or the symbol of one finally being held accountable? Behind closed doors, Diddy's team prepared for the next morning's hearing, where the judge would decide whether or not to grant temporary bail. If approved, Diddy could walk free within 24 hours, albeit under strict conditions. If denied, he would be sent back to his holding facility, awaiting appeal from a jail cell.
Sean Diddy Combs is facing another legal loss. Days before the rap mogul's scheduled sentencing for his prostitution-related convictions on October 3rd, a U.S. district judge has denied his team's request for an acquittal and a new trial. The judge, who presided over Combs' lengthy sex trafficking case, noted in his September 30th ruling, obtained by Deadline, the government at trial presented overwhelming evidence of Combs' guilt under the Mann Act on many occasions, with respect to its ex-girlfriends Cassie Ventura and a woman who only went by Jane. The women alleged they were coerced into participating in freak-offs during their respective relationships with Combs. He continued, that evidence consisted of testimony from Ventura and Jane, testimony from the escorts involved, and evidence from text messages and emails. The government proved its case many times over. And although the 55-year-old was acquitted of the more serious charges in his case, sex trafficking and racketeering charges, he was convicted on 2 counts of transporting individuals for prostitution in July. Each count carries a maximum prison sentence of 10 years, although the prosecution urged the judge to sentence Combs, who has pleaded not guilty to all charges, to a total of 11 years for both charges. The government wrote in its September 30th filing obtained by NBC News, the defendant will not be punished for any crimes of which he was acquitted, of course, but punishment for his crimes of conviction must take into account the manner in which he committed them.
Every outlet was covering it. CNN, TMZ, BBC, every network, every social feed, every talk show. The story wasn't just legal, it was cultural. A moment that blurred the lines between power, justice, and fame. As the night went on, insiders reported that Diddy barely slept. His lawyers worked past midnight, running mock hearings, fine-tuning their arguments. One insider claimed that Diddy kept pacing, muttering to himself, "They can't keep me in there. Not like that. Not me." By dawn, the courthouse was surrounded, fans held signs, cameras flashed, and law enforcement tightened security. Everyone knew, whatever happened next would define the rest of Diddy's life. Inside, the judge took his seat. The lawyer rose, calm and composed. "Just as before, Your Honor," he began, "the defense respectfully submits that Mr. Combs be released on bail pending appeal. He poses no threat, no flight risk, and has fully cooperated with every aspect of this process." The room was silent, the judge's face unreadable. Diddy sat still, staring at the floor. For a moment, time froze. And then, the judge spoke. Whether the decision went in his favor or not, one thing was certain: the world was watching. Diddy, once the face of unstoppable ambition, was now the symbol of desperation, redemption, and the fight for survival in a system that had finally caught up to him. As he waited for the ruling, one thought echoed in his mind, a thought that had driven him from the streets of Harlem to the heights of fame: "I'm not done yet."